What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Before we get started, I would love to have you guys in Birth Story Academy. It is premier childbirth education for your hospital birth, no matter what the birth looks like that you're planning. So medicated, unmedicated, a wait-and-see attitude, a belly birth, an induction, there is a module for all of it. And I have a blank name tag at your seat waiting to put your name on it. And the best part about Birth Story Academy is that I get to be your virtual doula. You go into my private Facebook group where I interact with you every single week and cheer you on as you plan and prepare for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like. So I hope you will go to birthstory.com and enroll in Birth Story Academy today. Woo! I love the cheering section.
That's so fun.
Hi, Jenna. Welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Heidi. How are you?
I'm so good.
Good.
And I am really excited to talk to you today about your business, Instagram, and your 4 birth stories.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And it's hard. We're just going to kind of jump into it more than my audience is used to because we're usually doing one birth story. But I need my audience to learn from you today about how different all of your birth experiences were and how your mindset shifted on the type of birth experiences that you wanted as your journey of parenthood went on. And so we're going to try to get to all 4. Okay. Which is going to be crazy.
We can do it.
Yeah, I think we can do it. So for everyone listening, I had the privilege of being Jenna's doula, sort of for her 3rd and sort of for her 4th. And we'll get into what that means, right?
Yes.
And we're going to talk about how different it can be to have a first birth experience versus a second, a 3rd, and then 4th, and how sometimes the ones that you think are going to be the easiest are the most challenging and all the things. So we're going to talk about, choices for medicated and unmedicated birthing also. So Jenna, yay. All right.
Thanks.
Before we get started, I love your Instagram. You've been doing reels before reels were a thing.
Yes.
So can you tell everyone how to follow you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Parenthood and Pushups. And then I have a blog that also is the same title, Parenthood and Pushups. And it really is just to share the real, the hilarious, the clean, uplifting versions of what it is to be a mom, because it can be a lot. And so it's fun when you can see somebody else who also is doing it and feel like it's relatable.
You are hilarious and you have 4 kids. And I never know how in the world, I have done, I think 2 reels and we are recording this in January of 2022. So I'm way behind in the reels world.
It just takes some practice. It just takes practice and a little planning and that's about it. But you could totally do it too.
Oh my gosh. Well, yours are so funny. I loved your carpool one, which was a year ago, probably the most, like waiting in the carpool line.
That is seriously real life me though. Like that's, I think the most important thing about all of those is that not a single thing that I produce is not completely and totally real of what I do. And you know, I've got a really good one coming soon. It's bath time before kids versus bath time after kids. And it's like the legit truth of what it is like to do those things.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, if you guys are driving and you couldn't write it down, I will put a link to Jenna's Instagram and her blog in the show notes if you are listening to this not live, because I don't know how to do show notes live on Fireside.
Yeah.
So we are recording this live. It will be an unedited show. So you're going to get all of it.
Oh boy.
It's all right. Every now and then we throw a cuss word. It's okay. Fireside they haven't told me I'm not allowed to do that yet. Okay. So we will keep doing it. All right. Well, let's start at the very, very kind of beginning as much as we can to get to 4 birth stories. But like a little bit about like, how did you meet your husband and what did family planning like look like for you? Because I'm assuming to have 4, I don't know how many kids you're gonna get to 4 kids. That's a conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But definitely 4 and done. We're very, very pleased with our family and we love every one of our kids and we're very grateful for them. And we're also very glad to know that we're good. Okay. We're good. We're done. But yeah, so Jonathan and I met in college. We were tour guides together. So he's a year older than me. We met in the tour guide office one summer working on campus. He was in charge of training me. I was the new tour guide and I totally played like, oh, I don't understand. I think I need some extra help. Do you think you could, tell me a little bit more? And so I kept asking him questions and then we just never stopped hanging out. And I would say within the first 2 months of being together, we knew that we were going to get married. And we were just that kind of couple. And I'm very grateful for that because I knew from the beginning. And so that was in college. We got married really young. I was 23. Yeah, I was 23 when we got married, which I think is funny because most people are like, are you sure? I mean, that's young, that's fast for today's generation. A lot of people wait and we just knew, like there was just no question about it. And pretty much right after we got married, I was like, all right, let's have some kids. And he was like, hold on a minute. Like, let's just wait a little while. Let's live a little bit of the married life. Let's get some years under our belt. And so we waited. We lived in Pennsylvania for a couple of years. And finally, when we decided it was time to have kids, we moved back to North Carolina, where we are both from, where both of our parents live. And we had Emily, who was our oldest, in 2016, and I was 27 and he was 28. So we were very ready, but at the same time, can you ever really be ready for your first kid? Like we were ready, but not really,
Right. I know. And I was a whole decade older than you when I went into parenthood too. So you were 27 years old. You'd been married for 4-ish years, been together for a little bit longer than that. And what did that conversation look like when you started to family plan?
It's an actually really unique story. It's not one that I've really told a lot of people about. So my father-in-law is a cancer survivor. And when he was going through treatments, when we were living in Pennsylvania, it was something that we were seriously talking about, how we wanted to make sure that we had time with him. And now he's in remission. He is fine. He is doing great. But at the time when you're going through those things and you wonder, that was really a big decision factor for us of like, we want to make sure that we have, because we were the first ones to get married on both sides of our family and we were the first ones to have a child. So we wanted to make sure that he at least had a grandchild. And now he has 7. So 4 of them are ours and then 3 are others from the other side. But that was a huge factor for us in starting that conversation, was like, we want him to have grandkids.
That is so sweet. I thought you were going to go the opposite of it. Like my brain is like, if I was later having cancer, I would want to be surrounded by lots of children. Right. That's how my brain jumped to it when you did it, is I'm like, oh, if I go through this hard thing, I would love the love of my children around me during those hard things. So what a beautiful gift. Did you guys say right away, like, we want to have 4 kids?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm. Well, I'm one of 5 and he's one of 4. So we knew we wanted more than 2.
Okay.
But as my parents always said, that they had the discussion. They said they'd have 2 and a talk. And then they ended up with 5 kids. And so we knew, definitely more than 2. But after that, we were kind of, we'll see. I mean, kids are expensive. You got to have to sleep somewhere. You got to put clothes on their backs. You got to feed them. They got to go to school. So what we decided was we were going to get through the first one. Okay. And then after that, we would definitely have a second one, but we didn't know what else we would do going forward. And once we had Maggie, we knew we weren't finished. Maggie's our 3rd, and we can talk about her birth later. But we knew she was not the final portion of our family yet. And so we knew we were in for at least one more.
Okay. Well, let's get into Emily's birth story.
Okay.
And I want to start with, you're 27 years old.
Yes.
Do you know anything about your fertility? Like, do you have a cycle every 28 days? Like, were you on birth control?
I wasn't on birth control. I did not know a ton about fertility. I think it's hilarious how hard you work as an adult to not have a baby until you decide that you want to have a baby and you realize, like, can I have a baby? Is that something that's possible? So I did not know a lot about that going in at all. And again, I was 27. I don't think that there are a ton of people that I knew at that time that were having kids. I had, the first in both sides of our family and in my friend group and all that kind of stuff. So when we decided, we just were kind of like, yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll go from there. I would say generally we are extremely blessed with fertility. And I know that is not something that everybody has. And I do not take that for granted that we did not have difficulty with our fertility. But I also didn't know anything going into it at all. I really didn't.
Yeah. Well, this is what I say over and over again on this podcast. We all have our hard. Mm-hmm. And your hard might not be fertility, but there are other hards. And I know at least one of your other hards. Yes. Okay. And so we get our hards, right? Like, yep. I wish we were all breezing through this life, but some of our journeys look hard in one way and hard in another way. Mm-hmm. So you were already not on birth control. So did you just start timing like sex, or were you just like, we'll just have sex whenever and see what happens? Yeah.
I mean, we were just kind of like, with all 4 of our kids, the way that we phrased it was we were not trying. So like, right. We were not officially putting a label on like, yes, we are trying. No, we're not trying or anything like that. It was like, if we have another kid, then this is when we are supposed to have this child. And that was definitely a faith-based choice for us. We're kind of in that place where like, we knew that if there was a child that was made, then that child was supposed to be here for a reason. And so we just were like, all right. And so it was January of 2016 that there was actually a massive blizzard in Pennsylvania. So we call Emily our blizzard baby, which totally weirds my sisters out because, talking about conception before you have kids, it's kind of like a weird thing. But now I'm like, yeah, she was conceived in the middle of a blizzard. I mean, what else are you going to do when you're legitimately snowed in? So,
yep. My little sister was a blizzard baby.
There you go.
She was born in 1994. So there must have been a blizzard in 1993 in Asheville, North Carolina, because my mom calls her the blizzard baby.
Yep. So Emily was our blizzard baby. She was born October of 2016.
Okay. So I do have a question about that. When people say like, we're not trying, right?
Yes.
There's only like a couple of days a month where you're actually fertile. So like, did it cross your mind ever? Like, well, I had my period 2 weeks ago, so like I might be ovulating, or like, did you have none of those thoughts? And it was just like,
no clue, not a single. With the other kids, I knew more. And it took just a little bit of time for me to kind of figure it out and finagle it with Emily, because like, I just didn't even, I mean, when I say I didn't know anything, I mean, like I legitimately learned on the job of like, oh yeah, we got to like time these things and learn about this and figure it out. And so anybody who has not had a child yet and is going in being like, I don't know. I have no clue. Me too. I didn't know at all.
How do you know? Now, I actually went in for family planning with my obstetrician, but I was also over the age of 35. So we wanted to talk about it. And I will never forget my OB saying, the number one reason for infertility in cis hetero couples is not enough sex. And I was like, oh, like how much sex should we be having then? And he was like, every other day. If you want to have a baby. And I was like, oh, that is a lot of sex.
That is.
I was like,
that's
okay,
a commitment.
That is a commitment.
Right?
Yes. It's an easier commitment when you don't have any children. But once like even one child comes along, that becomes like a much greater commitment.
Right.
All right. So here you are snowed in and you conceive Emily. How did you know you were pregnant?
I took a test actually on Valentine's Day of that year of 2016. I remember being like, oh, you know, it's like a lazy Saturday morning or something. I got up. I'm like, I'm going to take a test because I'm like within a certain amount of time of my period, we'll see. And I yelled to John, I'm like, John, get in here. And he's like, what? I'm like, pregnant. And he's like, oh. And then we were both kind of like looking at each other like, now what? What do you do? Like, okay, we're pregnant. Obviously we have a long way to go before there's a baby. Obviously we're like very, very at the beginning of this. We're not going to tell everyone. So you want to go to the grocery store? Like, that's what we did. We're like, all right, let's go get some groceries and meal plan for the week. Like, it was just a very weird moment of like, we were so excited. And then we were like, I guess we just keep going now.
Yeah. How were your pregnancies? And I'll do that plural.
Okay.
Were they all different?
They were very different, but there were some really similar patterns to them. I felt worse with every kid. And I think that was one of the reasons why by the time that we got to the fourth, I was okay to be done. Because I think there are a couple different factors. One being I got older with each kid. I had other children, so my body adjusted more quickly to being pregnant. I had my kids quickly, so my body was still probably very hormonal and getting back into all of that. And then also I had more kids each time to take care of, so there was less opportunity for me to take care of me. So I think that also made me feel worse. I would say Emily, I was not expecting how horrible you can feel, right? Like, it just was with every step of the way. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize when they say this that it actually meant this. Like, you know, you think sometimes, well, maybe we're hormonal and we're dramatic or whatever. And it was like, no, this stinks. Like, I don't enjoy this. And then with Sophie, being pregnant the second time, I was like, yeah, I know I'm not going to feel good. But then it was like, oh man, I really don't feel good. And I want to go take a nap, but I've got this other kid I have to take care of. And so with each child, I feel like that was a huge factor for me of like, I just didn't feel well for longer with each time because I was taking care of other kids.
Yeah. Any tips for those listening on how to make yourself feel a little bit better?
Yeah, I would say for me, in general, overall, pregnant or not pregnant, there are three major pillars to a recipe for a good day. And that's to eat well, get some sleep, and to exercise. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when I'm not meeting those pillars, when I'm not taking care of myself, pregnant or not, it does make it harder to feel good or to be mentally sound, to endure a long day or whatever it is. So especially when you're pregnant, I think trying to just eat as well as you can, get as much rest as you can, and to get out and exercise, even just walking and stretching and moving your body a little bit, whatever you can do, just helps so much.
It really does for all of us that are not pregnant or in our postpartum period too. I mean, those three pillars are really a great reminder. It's a great reminder to me that I need to get on my Peloton today because my audience knows I had surgery, a mommy makeover, breast and uterine surgery 6 weeks ago. So today's the first day I get to work out. Oh, and so all day, Jenna, I've been like, should I? I don't know.
Yes,
I don't know. I woke up and drank a ton of water. I was like, okay, I'm nervous though. It's hard when so if you are listening to this and you're pregnant and then you have a baby and you have this period of time where you're not exercising, it's intimidating to get back into it. But all I can say to myself and Jenna, I know, is just do it, everybody. Yeah. Just go walk out, put your tennis shoes on and go for a walk at the very least, you know, get your body moving. When did you find, because, I know your Instagram is heavy on parenting and then also exercising.
Mm-hmm.
When do you work out?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So it depends. I mean, it really depends. So I have worked out once this week. Pre-kids, I worked out every day, every single day. And then with each kid, I feel like the factors kind of scale back, because if I don't sleep, or if kids are sick, or hello, there's a pandemic, there's always something that is trying to get in the way of that exercise. But even if I'm not truly like putting a label on it, like this is my workout and I'm going to the gym today, I'm moving every day. I'm always trying to make sure that my body is moving. Right now, I'm alternating with John for early morning workouts at like 5 or 6 a.m. And those are pretty much the only times that I can do it, because once kids are up, it's just kind of like gangbusters through the day. And if I don't exercise first thing in the morning, it doesn't really get done. So the later it gets in the day, the smaller the chances for me.
That it makes me want to cringe. All my girlfriends know, like I'm not a morning person, and I've never been able to wake up in the morning. Like,
yeah.
If you, and this is why I work nights as a doula, and Colin, I mean, listen to me, I work nights. I work days as a doula,
right.
And Colin works nights, because if you call me before 6 a.m., I'm in a terrible mood for the whole day. Like if I don't sleep is a big pillar for me.
Mm-hmm.
If I do not get sleep, I'm a disaster for days, And so I can't be your doula at 2:00 in the morning anymore.
Yeah.
25 to 40 years old, I was. And at 40 years old, I made the choice to not work nights anymore. It's so hard. All right. Well, the question that everyone is dying to know when you're 27 years old and you get pregnant in the middle of a blizzard and you are, how in the world do you know you're in labor? Like, and I guess part of that is like, did you have a doula for number 1 and number 2?
I did not. I was actually induced with my first and my second.
Oh, okay.
Because I have a really cool thing. It's called Gestational Thrombocytopenia, which basically means that my platelet count gets really low when I'm pregnant. And it's only when I'm pregnant. And the biggest factor that it has the effect on is my ability to get an epidural or not. So
expound on that, because I know all about that.
Right.
But there's people out there that are like, you can't get an epidural? What's gestational thrombocytopenia?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So my platelet count gets really low. Your platelets are what help you like clot your blood, right? So if I am getting an epidural and for whatever reason something happens, my chance of having more of a hemorrhage is higher. And so what we did with both Emily and Sophie's labors and births was I was induced because I knew I wanted an epidural. And what we would do is we would time the end of my pregnancies with a round of steroids. So the steroids would boost my platelet counts, and they would also like make me legitimately crazy. I was like just all kinds of whacked out. And then at the end of my dose of steroids is when they would schedule my induction so that my platelet count was as high as it could be. And then I would have my option to get the epidural during labor.
And my understanding is that's not necessary if you're planning to go unmedicated.
Correct. So labors 3 and 4 were unmedicated, and I did not have to have any steroids, and I did not have any pain intervention at all.
Got it. Now, but that's a risk, right? Because what if we didn't do the round of steroids and then you had a 52-hour labor? You just got to suffer through it?
Yeah, I would have, or I could have opted for other pain methods, right? Pain management methods. But I wasn't interested in doing any of like the narcotic pain methods. And actually with the pandemic, nitrous oxide, isn't that nitrous?
Yep.
It's been in and out of the hospitals depending on like the surges of the pandemic. So it wasn't guaranteed that that was an option for me either. And in my local area, my health insurance practice and the anesthesia practice in our area are like battling back and forth about epidural costs and what they are in or out of, what's it called, Heidi? like
in network. Like
network.
if it's, it's going to be covered.
Right. And so all of those added up to like, well, maybe I just go unmedicated. It seems a little bit more simple. And
it's United Healthcare, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So for some reason, the anesthesiology group in our area in Charlotte, North Carolina, is not in network with United Healthcare, but yet there's no other anesthesiologist available at the hospital. Right. So if you have United Healthcare and you're pregnant in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you want to have an epidural at this particular hospital, you have to pay cash for it.
Yes. And it's crazy. A lot of money. It's a lot of money. And I know that there are a lot of people that's not, that you can't afford that. Like that's just a lot. And they also are going back and forth for months and months afterwards, trying to do the whole paperwork battle. And I just wasn't interested in it. Yeah.
So, okay. So gestational thrombocytopenia means you only have this condition when you're pregnant. Okay. Yep. Because there is idiopathic, which means like this is something you have all of the time. Right. Now, the next question people are like, how do you know that you have that?
Well, when you get pregnant, you go in and they do like a general regular blood workup. And when I was pregnant with Emily, my first OB appointment was actually when we were still living in Pennsylvania. It was before we even moved back to North Carolina. And I was not super close with that particular OB. And they had me going to a hematologist and like doing all these extra like screenings and stuff. And I moved and switched. And I ended up with an OB that I think is on the later end of his career and is probably the most relaxed. I've seen it all. Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it kind of people. And he made it seem like it was far less of a tragedy than my original provider did. So I was really glad that I switched. But it all was from just an initial blood screen from those early days.
Yeah. So what I want the audience to hear is that if you, in those early blood screens, if you happen to throw gestational thrombocytopenia, right? Don't worry. If you want to have an epidural, you can have one. And we're going to get into Jenna's epidurals, right? By doing a round of steroids and timing and induction.
Yep.
If you don't want to sign up for all of that, then I would hire a doula and go for an unmedicated birth.
Right.
So back to Emily.
Yeah,
I had asked the question and then I threw you way off with all my other questions. Sorry. So I had said, how do you know you're in labor? And then I'm like, oh, okay. So you go in for your induction. How many weeks gestation are you?
I was 39 and 6. It was 39 weeks and 6 days because she was born the day before her due date, right? 39 weeks and 5 days then.
Depends on how long you were induced for. I don't know. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get into the hospital.
Yep.
And I'm assuming they do a vaginal exam.
Nope. I sat in a waiting room for 3 hours.
Okay. That's
so
fun.
I got there and they were like, oh, you know what? We're really full and you're not in labor. So you're going to just hang out for a little bit. So I was like super nervous driving into the hospital. I'm like, I know I'm going to be induced. I have no idea what's going to happen. They wanted to do Cervidil overnight the night before because I was completely just, first kid. I was locked up. I was like, there was no progression whatsoever cervically. Okay. So I got there. And then finally around like 11 o'clock or midnight was when I got admitted, put me in a delivery room, did some Cervidil. And they were like, all right, like sleep well. And I just was like in a hospital bed hanging out for a little bit and letting the Cervidil work. And then in the morning they started Pitocin.
Okay. So a couple of things I want the audience to know is Cervidil is a prostaglandin.
Yes.
It goes in your vagina like a tampon.
Yep.
And it can stay in for up to 12 hours. And the point is to help soften or ripen the cervix. So we've got a thick cervix that's a 0% effaced and hard. And the whole point of Cervidil is to soften it, thin it, and maybe dilate you a little bit. Okay. Now, then once they've done that, sometimes they'll do what they did with you, start Pitocin in the morning. So tell me about it. Did you sleep at all?
No. But also I think, does anyone ever sleep well in the hospital? No, especially before you have your first kid. no, especially when you know what's coming. Like I have a human being inside of me that I need to push out tomorrow.
Yeah.
No.
Do you know what I would have told you if I was your doula?
What?
And some people don't want to do this, but I would have told you to take a sleep aid.
Well, they would have given it to me if I had been admitted earlier. So the nurses even said, they're like, we're sorry that you had to wait. You have passed that threshold for like being able to have some sort of a sleep aid for the evening, because we want you to be up early so that you can start Pitocin. And me being 27-year-old, like clueless Jenna, I'm like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. Good night. Like
doula over here is like, F that. Give me the Ambien at 1 a.m.
I should, you know what I mean? For sure. Oh my gosh, for sure. Yeah.
It's okay though. You just, most people, I'm saying this because most people don't know to ask, right? Like, no. And if they put you to bed at 11 and you're still awake at 1, push your button and ask for your, your sleep aid.
Yeah.
So in the morning they wake you up. Do they let you eat anything?
I snuck a clementine and a Cliff Bar in the bathroom. They wouldn't let me eat. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom for a minute. And I like stole snacks out of my bag and ate them in the bathroom, and then came out and was like, all right, I'm ready for the day.
Oh my God, I love you. Good girl. Withholding food from a birthing person is both unethical and not evidence-based. So eat it up, girl. I'm proud of you.
I need breakfast. I'm one of those people. So
you said you need sleep, you need food, and you need exercise. And if they're going to take the first 2 things away from you, I mean, what kind of experience are we about to have? It's not like I would say labor is exercise, but yes. You also need sleep and you need food, right? Like these are our pillars.
For sure.
So they start Pitocin in the morning.
Yes.
When did you start feeling something?
So apparently I was contracting overnight, because they have you on monitors while you're trying to sleep. And I was so physically unaware of what it felt like to have a contraction, like even legitimately like a Braxton Hicks. I didn't really know that I was contracting. And the nurse came in and was like, look, you're contracting all on your own. This is amazing. And I'm like, I am? Oh. She was like showing me on the monitor how it was going up and down, whatever else. And so when they started me on the Pitocin, they're like, we're going to really ramp you up. Like, are you ready for this? And I'm like, okay, sure. Like, why not? Let's have a baby. So they opened me all the way up in my Pitocin. So it went from like 0 to very intense very quickly for me, because one, I did not have any understanding of like what it was that I was anticipating. And 2, it was just kind of like, oh, this is what labor feels like. I don't know if I'm ready for this. This is a lot. Yeah.
And opening it wide up, Jenna, means going up in increments of 2. Yes. So from 2 to a max dose of 20. Sometimes they'll do a max dose of 30 if you have special approval or an intrauterine pressure catheter to make sure they're looking at the strength of contractions. But that means that like in a very short period of time, so if we go up by 2 every 30 minutes, right? Like within a couple of hours, you're up to 20.
Yep. So I think I got up to 10 before I was like, white flag, give me the epidural. I'm done. Okay. No more.
So really, I mean, that's just like 2 hours, 3 hours, right? Like you're in to get to 10. So you've just got a couple of turns and you're feeling it. Did they do a vaginal exam before your epidural? Like, did you have any idea how dilated you were?
I think I was maybe a centimeter. And I was like really disappointed, because I really wanted to be more, having done the Cervidil and everything else. But first baby, like that was progress. And I was trying
That was progress.
Right. Exactly. So.
Yeah. Okay. So you get this epidural. What would you say? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How did it go?
Okay. So epidural is like a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, because it's great pain management. I had a fantastic epidural with Emily. I did not feel anything. I actually thought it was hilarious, because I'd be like, come here, poke my butt. I can't feel anything. Poke my leg. I feel nothing. I thought it was so funny. But the flip side of it is that it's also scary when you learn about what the procedure is. It's scary having the procedure. And, you have to be at least a little bit aware of what it is that you're committing to. So my experience with getting my epidural with Emily was, I was really worried that John was going to pass out. If I'm being totally honest, I was really afraid that he was going to pass out, because he knew what was happening. My mom was actually there for Emily's birth. So she was there and John was there. and they only allow one support person when you get your epidural. So my mom left and John was sitting in front of me, and they have you hunch over. And for me, the hardest part was that you have to be very still because you're getting a needle put into your spine, and that's important. But at the same time, I was really unprepared for how to manage the pain that I was experiencing. My initial reaction was just to clench. I was literally just like doing obviously on a podcast you can't see, but just imagine I'm making like a face. Like it was just not relaxed. There was nothing
pulling
relaxed about it.
up and holding in.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And so once the epidural was in, it definitely allowed me the opportunity to relax. And I'm glad that I got it because I felt like it helped me learn and experience in her birth more than I may have otherwise, because I had finally just been able to like relax and breathe a little bit.
Yeah. So the epidural really helped be a teacher for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So that you could be like, oh, this is what it feels like to relax my bottom and to breathe through a contraction. And you felt the pressure. I'm assuming you still felt pressure, but not like all of the pain.
Yes.
I think that's a really good thing to note about it. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I dedicated an entire module to the epidural procedure in my online course for Birth Story Academy, because I felt like 60 to 80% of people go into their births and are like, I'm not going to get an epidural. And yet 80 to 90% of first time birthing persons get an epidural. So and we don't know what to do. Like, how do you sit still? So I have this random 1-2 method where I think it's really important to communicate to the anesthesiologist, which is like 1, a contraction is starting, and 2, the contraction is completely over. And then that helps them be able to work in between. So if you're able to communicate, or your partner is able to communicate, then you can tell the anesthesiologist, like, hold the phone. You got to work in between contractions because it's real hard to sit still.
So helpful yes, for sure.
Yeah. After your epidural went in and you were relaxed, how long after till you delivered?
Let's see. Epidural went in probably around 1, and Emily was born at 8 something.
That's so fast.
Yeah.
For a first time. So less than 24 hours for an induction for a first time. Like, that's so fast.
Yes, which will be a theme going forward. Yes. We can talk about the speed of it as we continue.
What I want everyone listening to hear is the average induction for a Bishop score of 0, where you need Cervidil, is 3 to 5 days.
There you go.
So less than 24 hours for a first time birth with an induction is very fast. Yes. Okay. So from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., what'd you do?
I just kind of hung out. We actually had like a 2-hour discussion about circumcision in the delivery room, which was hilarious because obviously Emily's a girl. So that was not a necessary discussion whatsoever.
But you didn't know the assigned sex.
I did, but nobody else did.
Okay.
So I could not help myself. So this is you
throwing John off?
Yeah, pretty much. So we had this whole lengthy discussion, and then here this sweet little girl is born, and my mom and John are like, seriously, we could have talked about something else for a really long time. Like, why did we discuss this for so long? Like, I was playing the game. Like, I was not going to give anything away.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So we talked. My dad, his office, he's a dentist, is right around the corner from the hospital. So my dad came over and hung out for a while. This was, pre-pandemic, where you could have people come and visit you.
Yeah.
And hilariously, I was so, so glad to see him when he came in. Like, he's one of those people that like lightens a room. And so he was fun to have in a delivery room, which I know is a weird thing to say. And then he left before things got really going. And then towards the end, I started to really feel nauseous. I mean, you're on a full day of not eating anything, and you do have an epidural, and that can be a side effect of epidurals, is to obviously not feel well. And obviously labor in general can make you feel nauseous. So I ended up taking a little bit of a nap.
Okay.
And then I woke up, and my OB was there. He was actually on call, which was really nice. And he was like, "Oh, let's have a baby." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I had not realized when I finally took my nap, I relaxed enough that she had descended all the way down and was like ready to come out. So,
okay. Now, did they do a vaginal exam to determine that? Okay. So he
Yes.
kind of came in and was like, just to check on how things were going. And then was like, oh, like you're 10 plus 2. Like, let's have a baby.
Like, you're ready. Let's go. I'm like,
okay. Awesome.
Yep.
How many times did you push, or how long was your pushing period?
With Emily, I think it was 7 minutes.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
This is leading us down a journey of how the rest of your births may go. So you pushed about 7 minutes.
Yeah, it is not typical. Like, please don't take any of this and think like everybody is different. Every story is different. And for whatever reason, my body just really is very proficient at birthing children.
It is.
And so, yes, I pushed for 7 minutes for her to come out.
But what I want my audience to hear is that you labored down. Yes. You didn't have a vaginal exam, so you had no idea where you were. But while you were sound asleep with an epidural, fully relaxed, fully surrendering. When you were nauseous, you were probably in transition. Wink, wink, But like when you were fully relaxed, you can push your baby's head from 10. If you're 10 and 0 centimeters, you can push the baby out. It's much quicker. Or you can just lay there and take a nap and let your body do all the work while you're sleeping. And then you just push for a little bit. Did you have any tearing?
I did. I had 2nd degree tearing with Emily and got maybe 2 or 3 stitches.
Okay.
And they fixed it right there. I still was relatively numb. So I feel like that's one thing that most women are like really, really scared about. It's like, oh my gosh, it's going to hurt so bad to have tearing and to get stitches and all that kind of stuff. And like at the end of everything that you just did, it's like, there's a baby on your chest. You're not even thinking really about like what else is happening down below at all.
Yeah. The only time it's really sucky is when there's like a ton of hemorrhoids. Yeah. I swear to you, hemorrhoids hurt way worse than tearing.
Those are evil.
like you give birth and you're like, but my butt,
right.
My butt hurts so bad. Yes. Like who cares about the vagina? That heals pretty quickly. All right. Well, let's jump forward to Sophie's birth. Okay. So how many years later do you get pregnant again?
9 months.
Okay. Well, years. There we go. So 9 months later, you are pregnant again.
Yep.
So then 18 months later, you're getting ready to give birth again.
Yes.
So do you, at this point, like you're 29 years old, I'm assuming. Okay. So you're 29, you've had this, once you have gestational thrombocytopenia, do you always have it?
I'll let you know. I don't think so. I think what will happen is I have to wait until after I'm finished breastfeeding and my hormones kind of regulate again from everything else. And then they'll start to look at those CBC counts again to know for sure. I don't think so. But
you went like pregnant, breastfeeding, pregnant, breastfeeding, pregnant, breastfeeding. Okay. Got it.
Pretty
So it's been years. How old is Emily?
She's 5.
Okay. So it's been like 5 years of consistently just being pregnant or breastfeeding. So we don't know. Okay. So you get pregnant again and your blood work says you have gestational thrombocytopenia still.
Yep.
And did you think about, like with Sophie, were you like, I loved that epidural, let's do that again? Or were you like, maybe we could do an unmedicated birth? Like, where was your headspace?
My headspace was a little bit of panic of the fact that I was going to have 2 kids under the age of 2. And so if I'm being honest, the birth was more of like, all right, let's do it again. Like, here we go again. I just did this. We got this. We're going to do it again. And I pretty much wanted to just repeat everything that happened with Emily because it was a great birth and it was not an exceptionally difficult one. And if I could have replicated that, I would have. The only thing is that no 2 births are ever alike, right? And so me trying to have the same journey again was not going to happen. We did do a lot of things similarly. I was induced again. I did have Pitocin again. I did opt for an epidural again, but it was a different experience.
Okay. So let's break that down. So you do the steroids again.
Yes.
What gestation do they do that for you to go in?
I actually had her on the earlier side. It was more towards the beginning of 39 weeks versus the end. So she was born a few days earlier than Emily was gestationally.
Okay. Got it. Was there a reason for that or just scheduling?
It was scheduling. It was that my OB knew me this time around and was just kind of like, this is what we can do. And then also I think it just kind of depends on when the hospital has availability, how busy they are, how many people are having babies at that time. And that's when I was able to get on the list.
Okay, got it. Did they do the same thing with Cervidil at night?
They didn't have to. I was 3 centimeters when I went in for my induction with Sophie.
Okay, so your Bishop score was very high,
Yes.
meaning you didn't have to do any cervical ripening. So there wasn't a need for Cytotec or Cervidil or a Cook's catheter, which is the balloon. So what did they do? What was the plan? Just Pitocin?
Yeah. So
Okay.
my time was 11 a.m. I went in at about 11 a.m. and they put me in my delivery room, which funny enough, it was actually the same room that Emily was delivered in, which my husband is very good with numbers. And he's like, this is the same room number. I remember the room number. This is the same room number. I'm like, cool, let's have a baby. And so we go in, they got me hooked up to my IV. They got me hooked up with the Pitocin. That was 11 a.m. and she was born at 5:15 p.m.
Okay, so fast.
Yes.
Did they break your water for you or did it break on its own?
They broke my water with both births for me.
Okay.
And yeah, I opted for that.
Okay, that's really, really fast. So now your second induction is essentially less than 6 hours.
Yes.
When in the world did you have time for an epidural?
Well, what they did was they preemptively gave it to me. So
Okay.
I was not really in a ton of pain yet. I was definitely feeling contractions, but they basically hooked me up to everything and then had the anesthesiologist called, and the anesthesiologist came when it was good in their availability so that I was guaranteed to have the epidural.
Got it. How did it go?
It was challenging. This
Okay.
epidural was definitely memorable. I think what happened, again, you're having contractions. I don't know how to manage these contractions because with Emily, my management was to get an epidural. I didn't learn how to breathe through them. I clenched through all of the contractions that I experienced with her. With Sophie's birth, as soon as I was feeling them, again, I didn't really understand how to cope with them. And so during the epidural procedure, I was contracting. I did not advocate for myself and say things like, I need to take a break, or can we wait until this contraction is finished? I just was grinning and bearing it. I mean, literally. And when it happened, I have no fault whatsoever towards the anesthesiologist, but it was a very painful procedure. There was something that was a nerve that was touched or something that caused me to react involuntarily. And I like arched my back mid-procedure, like whatever they struck, it caused me to react.
That's a reflex. Okay. And we're not in control of our reflexes.
Cool. Yeah, I said a lot of bad words, things I don't normally say at all. And there was a lot of yelling. And then the contraction finished. They finished the epidural and I was able to relax. And of course, then me being me, I was apologizing to everybody. Like, I'm so sorry I said those words. I promise I didn't mean them. Like, thank you so much for your time. Like all these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that.
This is like the story of their life though, you know? So
Right?
like
For sure.
the anesthesia comes in and they're like, what fucking took you so long? You know what I mean? And then they're yelling at them, hurry it up. And I just,
Right.
you know, and then somebody asks a question like, do you have a history of? And they're like, no, just put it in. And then they're
Right.
like, I'm so sorry.
I feel
You're
so
my
much better.
angel. I love
Thank
you. You're
Yes, exactly. That was me. That was definitely
once
me.
it was in though, did you feel okay?
I felt okay. It definitely wasn't as strong as Emily's. I'm like, hey, pinch this. I can't feel anything. Sophie's was more like, I still had relative feeling. I could feel myself contracting, but it was not immensely painful. So it took away a lot of the pain reception, but it didn't take away a lot of the feeling, if that's understandable.
Yeah, it wasn't as good of an epidural as you had with Emily.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a headache or have to have a blood patch or anything like that? Or was it it was just not the epidural space, I mean, you have to be in the perfect space, right? You'll hear people all the time say it only worked on my left side, or it only worked on my right side, or it was like too high, or, you know, when an epidural is like Emily's, when it works, it's amazing.
Right.
When it's not amazing, it's very frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah. So thankfully you only had to deal with that for a couple of hours.
Right.
So let's say, what time do you think you got your epidural?
Probably about 1.
Okay. So 4 hours. Great. You had to deal with that. Okay. Now this time, how did you know it was time to push and deliver a baby?
I felt her head coming down because I had more feeling, and because I had done it once before, I was a little more aware of what was going on. I also advocated for myself a little bit more. And so I was like, okay, I feel like it's getting close to time. I feel pressure in that area and wanted to ask for help with it.
Okay. So what, the OB comes in and gives you a vaginal exam?
Yep.
Okay.
It might have been the nurse actually.
Okay.
And then from there, you know, it's like, I always think it's hilarious when they get you set up, like the delivery room set up. It's like a pit crew, like a race car pit crew. Like everybody comes in and there's just stuff everywhere and the lights are changing. And you're like, oh, okay, we're having a baby now.
Yeah. It's so funny. I mean, they could do it softer and gentler and slower, but you know.
Yeah, but they also do it a bunch during the day. So yeah.
They have the carts all lined up in the hallway, like ready to go. They just like, I love when they bring the cart in because I'm like, oh yeah, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? It can be very motivating too, because you're like, oh, okay, I'm done here.
Yeah.
How long did you push with Sophie?
5 minutes.
Oh my God. Okay.
Again, atypical. Please don't take any of this. Is my story. This is not, you know, what happens a lot. Yes, 5 minutes.
But some people. Go ahead.
Well, I say 5 minutes. There's a flip side to this, which we can continue to talk about. But 5 minutes means that she was born really quickly, which means that all of the mucus was not squeezed out of her lungs. So, second time mom, I'm at least not as unknowledgeable on these things, but she was like coughing up some mucus for a little bit afterwards.
That's such a good point. When they're born that fast, they can tear you, right? Because they don't sit on your perineum for a long time, stretching you, and they don't get squeezed for as long to get all that fluid and mucus out of their lungs. So, so you guys, what Jenna and I are saying is like, there is a benefit to pushing for a while. Or at least the baby crowning for a long time, you know, getting emerging slowly, right? Yes. Did she have to do any NICU time?
She did not have to do any NICU time, but there was a NICU team that came and had to evaluate her because she was breathing a little oddly. And I felt so embarrassed as her mom because I'm holding her and I did not realize that the sounds that she was making were not like cuddly newborn cooing kind of sounds. They were like, she's got mucus in her lungs. She's trying to like get out and wasn't breathing as well as she could have. And the nurse heard it and was like, we're going to have her evaluated. And then once they evaluated her and they kind of got a little bit more of the mucus out, she spit more of it out over the next day or so. She was fine. But as a mom, I felt horribly guilty that I was like not noticing that that was something that was important.
You are not supposed to know your 1 minute old sounds, you know?
Right.
Like it takes time. It's like any relationship.
Yes.
It takes time, you know? I had a mom who delivered right after you on this fourth one. Okay. On your fourth baby. And I was laboring with her the whole time and she had this cough and my mommy instinct was like, God, something is not right. I have never heard a cough like that before, you know? And I spoke up a couple of times like, hey, her baseline heart rate's like a little bit high. And, you know, I'm not a medical person though. I'm like her doula, but I was like, hey, I feel like it's weird that her like baseline heart rate's like 125. And she's just got this cough and she had been sick, you know? So everybody in the room's just like, whatever, she's sick. She's got a cold. We're in the middle of COVID. So she was COVID negative, but it was like, oh, she's got a cold. Anyway, she had a pulmonary embolism. So how do you know? You know what I mean? I carry guilt, like not knowing. And then I'm like, cause my mommy instinct was like, something's different, but not enough to really know, you know, we have to let these things go, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not supposed to know the first time we meet someone, even our babies, all their sounds and their quirks. We get to know them pretty quickly, but you know, so she's good. She doesn't go to the NICU. She stays on your chest. Like, and now you go home with 2 kids under 2.
Yeah, we do.
So do you guys ever add birth control?
Nope.
No. Okay. So you just have to be, are you being careful, or are you just like, we're going to keep going on with life? Like, are you trying to not get pregnant in between babies? Or are you just like, hey, as quick as they come together, they come?
Both. I mean, like we would not actively try to conceive, but at the same time, we were not doing anything to be overly cautious.
Okay.
I also am one of those people that I'm not a huge fan of being pregnant. And so for me, I was willing to have my kids closer together to be able to have that stage completed. And I know that that sounds ungrateful if you are struggling through fertility or anything like that, but pregnancy, not my favorite stage of life. And I'm very grateful that I have completed all of my pregnancies for my life. And now I'm moving on. I'm getting rid of my maternity clothes.
Yes, I love it. I will tell you this as someone who did fertility and also felt that way. Okay. So I did fertility treatments or, you know, hormones for 10 months before I got pregnant. I hated being pregnant. As soon as I gave birth, I looked at my husband and said, because we had originally said we were going to have 4. And I said, if you want another one, you have to get me pregnant right away. And I was pregnant within 5 months because I had to be done with it, you know? And then like 3 months later, like he had a vasectomy. And then 2 years later, I was like, no, I want to have another baby, you know? But I feel that, you know, I don't want you to discount like, even people who have a long fertility journey too, like can still hate being pregnant.
And that's fine. They're totally allowed to feel that way. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So it's okay. Everyone listening, it's okay to really want to be a parent and not like pregnancy. And some people love it. My sister, gosh, she loved it. She would have been a surrogate. She loved pregnancy. And I was like, you are weird. I don't know who
I've got a friend like that. And she's like, it's just this amazing, miraculous time. And I'm like, it is, but also, where are my feet? I cannot find them.
And for someone like you who likes to work out every day and have ownership of their body, I mean, that's hard. Did you tandem nurse?
No.
No. Okay. I wasn't sure like how your nursing journey was going. So at some point you stopped nursing.
I did. Emily, all of my kids I nursed between 11 and 12 months. And then by that point they were done. And so was I. It wasn't anything that I forced or like timed with. It was just more, they all kind of weaned themselves on their own timing.
Okay. So Jenna, this is crazy because I know your 4th was just born in September. Okay. So I'm like, I mean, if you're not having any more, like you're almost done.
Yeah.
Like this journey of like all these pregnancies and nursings and like whatever, like the arrival is about to happen.
It's
like
weird.
It's so weird. Crazy. You know, you need to go like in October of 2022, you need like a vacation with just you and John.
Oh, we're
like,
planning one. We are.
No pump. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm so excited. Yes.
Like this really interesting. And then dream and talk about what the next phase of life looks like, because this one, you know, enjoy it for the next 6 or 7 months, but it's coming to a close.
Yeah. It's weird.
You know?
Very bittersweet.
I know. And then the real parenting and push-ups begins, you know? Oh gosh. All right. Well, let's jump. I know we're jumping you guys, but that's because there's 4. Let's just jump ahead to Maggie. Okay. So you're pregnant with number 3. How many months or years later?
Between Sophie and Maggie, there's 26 months apart. So a little bit longer. I had a 4-month window where I was not pregnant and I was not nursing. And it's the only time that I've had that window in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Well, now I guess it'll be almost 6 that I've done. But so we waited just a little bit longer. And I was got pregnant in August of 2019 with Maggie.
Okay. And no miscarriages
No.
in between. Have you ever had a miscarriage?
No.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Very fortunate.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to note that for people that like sometimes there's breaks. Sometimes people have 4 kids and there's breaks because there was a loss in between. So
no,
August.
The break was for our sanity more than anything. I mean, having 2 kids close in age, like it's a big commitment. And so I was enjoying a little bit of extra just calm me time in those 4 months. So it was me kind of dragging my feet a little bit of like, oh, we're going to do this again. All right, we're going to do it again. Let's go.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what it's like to have 4, but mine are 15 months apart. And I know what it's like to, do it back to back on purpose.
Right. There you go.
Awesome. So you get pregnant with Maggie.
Yep.
Okay, now this is enter Heidi into Jenna's world, right? Like, so I was your doula that you had chosen. Can you tell people how you went from like, let's take steroids, do this planned epidural to I'm going to hire a doula?
Okay, so after Sophie's birth, I had these phantom back spasms for like several months from my epidural. It was in the exact spot that I had my epidural. It would happen when I was sleeping and I would wake up arched just like I was during my epidural. And I did not want to experience that again, but I did not know what the heck I was going to do because I've delivered 2 babies, but at the same time, I don't know how to cope with a lot of the things that go into delivering a baby. So I'm doing reading and all the reading says, hire a doula, find a doula. And I'm like, what is this doula? Let's find one. So I go onto Facebook, onto the Mom to Mom group, which I typed in the search bar, Charlotte, doula. And Heidi's name comes up over and over and over again. Everybody's just going, if you want to hire a doula, you got to hire Heidi. Like Heidi's your gal. And I found a couple of other people. And for whatever reason, Heidi was just the one that I was like, okay, I'm going to call her. So I called you. And then we talked for like an hour and a half.
Yep. And then we decided you could do it.
Yep.
I'm like, we decided. You decided you could do it.
Well, no, we decided because in our conversation, you had already fully booked your May of 2020. Yeah. And you were like, I think I might be able to just squeeze you in. I'll just squeeze you and we'll see what happens. And I'm like, okay, this sounds great. And so I feel like, it was meant to be.
Yes. Okay. But let's talk about May of 2020.
Let's.
Okay. There's this thing called COVID.
Yeah. It was early pandemic days. My mother-in-law and I were talking about this last night. Like, I wish there was a way to go back to have been able to know some of the things that we were doing in early pandemic days and be like, oh, that was dumb. Like, you didn't have to do that. Like spraying down your groceries, man, we sprayed every single edge of every grocery that we brought into our house those couple of months in the beginning.
I mean, like, every Amazon box I wiped down with Clorox.
Yes. If we got takeout, we put it inside of a cardboard box and then sanitize the outside of everything before we brought it in our house. And then would just carry the food cartons into the house. Like, surfaces were scary.
And maybe we should still be doing that. But who knows? But we're not.
No.
I mean, I just published an episode on how to survive Disney World. While pregnant. And the episode should have been how to not get COVID at Disney World because we didn't tell anyone we went to Disney in Animal Kingdom because we were like embarrassed that in the middle of the December 2021 surge of Omicron or whatever the hell that name is, we decided to go to the most infectious place ever, Florida.
Yeah, but it's outside.
Yeah. So, and guess what? We wore N95s and I can confidently say no one got COVID and it was awesome. All right. So we're in these early days and we decide we're going to do this.
Yes.
But we have no idea like what the hospital like policies and procedures and all of the things are going to be.
They changed like every week.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about how we had a backup plan because I can't remember. I ended up going to Montana, right?
Yep, you were out of town. We had backup doula.
was supposed to be back in town. I was in Montana for like March, April, and I was supposed to be back at the beginning of May.
Yes. But you were not back yet, which was fine because I was taken care of by Sarah. She was wonderful. She came and did like a midwife's natural induction, let's get it going kind of thing. And the reason was because I was feeling the time pressure because my dad, being a dentist, was closed for several months. And we needed him and my mom, because they lived down the street from us, to watch the older two kids while we went to deliver Maggie. But he was going back to work because it was time for him to reopen his practice. So I felt this window where he was going back to work, but Maggie hadn't been born yet. And we needed to like get things going so that they could at least watch the kids long enough for me to be able to get home from the hospital and he to go back to work and not to bring COVID into our newborn baby's house.
Yeah.
So it was a little stressful.
So Sarah was Sage Mama Doula, and she's sagemamadula.com, is simply a miracle, right? So she is an herbalist. She is a doula, and she is a home birth midwife. She's incredible. So she came over to give you, which you give yourself, but to give the recommendations of some natural herbal induction things. What are some of the things that she did?
She gave me cervical massage, and I wouldn't say it was a sweep. It was definitely a massage, because when you go to the OB and you get a sweep, it hurts, right? Like it just is, it doesn't feel good. But what Sarah did was she took her time. She was very gentle. She was very patient, and she was, it was really cool because she was like, oh, you're about 2, maybe a soft 3 centimeters. And she's like, I feel your baby's head. She's right there. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I forgot that, like, when you do this, like, there's this baby right there. Like, I'm going to meet this child. And so she was so sweet and just very, very encouraging. She did that. She brought over blue cohosh. She brought over a very potent red raspberry leaf, like delicious tea brew that she had me on like certain intervals with drinking it. She brought over castor oil, which she was like, you can do if you want. And I was like, I don't want to do that yet.
Okay.
And then there was something else. And then also an enema as well.
All right. So did you do everything besides the castor oil?
I did.
Okay.
And I did like all the timing. I basically was just like, I am home today. I am dedicating my time to this. I am going to do all of the things, walking, whatever I can do. The mile circuit, everything. It was like my full-time job that day, besides obviously taking care of the other kids, was to go into labor.
Yeah. And the mile circuit is amazing. That's milescircuit.com, MILES circuit.com. And it's just different positions and stuff to help get your labor going when you're already having signs or doing an herbal induction. The cervical massage was to release prostaglandins. So that can kind of soften your cervix some more and kind of kickstart labor. How many weeks were you?
Like mid 39.
Yeah.
No, she was due. No, I was 39 weeks and like 5 days, because she was due on John's birthday, but she was born 2 days before.
Okay. So we were right in there in your, like, basically your gestational times from when you gave birth to Emily and Sophie, and you were having a lot of prodromal labor.
So much prodromal labor.
So your body was ready. We knew it would likely respond to something. Okay. So you do all the things. What happens?
Nothing. Nothing. I literally cried myself to sleep that night. And John, looking back, like, God love him, he's such a saint. I'm like, this baby's never coming out of me. I'm going to be pregnant until I'm 80 and I'm never going to have a baby. And it's just going to be, I'm like hysterical. And he's like, I think it's time for bed. And I'm like, okay.
Well, it was doing something.
Yeah.
It was softening that cervix and it was opening it some more.
I also was contracting and not fully recognizing it because of prodromal labor. I feel like that just really confused me so much. And so when I was contracting, I wasn't believing it because I was thinking, I'm like, oh, this is nothing, right? Like I was expecting full on Emily contractions where I was like grinning down, bearing it, like not able to do anything. I didn't realize that like natural labor when it starts is not what it's like when it's in transition. It builds, you rest, there are breaks. And so I just went to bed.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yep.
Just like you did with the epidural. You just went to sleep. Okay. And what happened?
I slept through my entire early labor, woke up in active labor.
Okay.
So I woke up at 5 a.m. and I had definitely felt strong contractions overnight. It was not the best night's sleep, but also I didn't put any credence in what was happening. And I woke up and I was like, maybe I should time this one. And the next one came like 8 minutes later. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll time this one too. And the next one came like 8 minutes later. And I woke John up and I was like, hey, I think I'm in labor. And he was like, oh, okay. I'm going to go put my out of office up and for work. I'll be back and I'm going to take the dog out and I'm just going to like, get the car packed and whatever else. I'm like, I'm going to take a shower.
What time is this?
This is a little before 6, maybe at like 5:45. I'm finally like, yeah, I should get up. I think I might be in labor. Stuff is happening.
Okay. And you were texting me and Sarah.
Yes, I was.
Okay. I'm remembering this. I just wanted to know. So we're getting text messages that like in our mind, we're like definitely the herbal induction has worked, right? Maybe not as quickly, like 2 hours later, but it was definitely like, it was working. It was slowly softening your cervix. Those contractions were coming slowly, like they do in a natural, spontaneous way versus an induction with Cervidil and Pitocin or artificial rupture of water.
Right.
So, and just so the audience knows, Sarah and I are on high alert that Jenna's going to go fast.
Yes.
Okay. Like we were like, okay, Sarah had already felt the head in the cervix, right? And knew everything and her history. So we were like, this is not going to take a long time. Yeah. So you get in the shower.
A little before 6.
Okay.
And I'm in the shower and I'm like, ooh, these are good contractions. Oh, Heidi told me I should do deep squats to open my cervix. And I get like 3/4 of the way down in a squat and my water breaks everywhere in the shower. And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like trying to yell for John, but he's downstairs in our basement where we were living at the time, putting his out of office up and our other 2 kids are asleep. So I'm like, John, we gotta go. I don't know what to do. So I get out of the shower. I'm like, adult diaper. I put an adult diaper on so I didn't leak all over my house. And my contractions started coming very quickly. It was like, they went from 8 minutes apart to like 3 to 5 minutes apart, if that.
Yeah.
So he comes back upstairs and I'm like, we gotta go now. And he's like, okay. So I do not know how my mom knew, but my mom had woken up that morning and was like, oh, Jenna's going to have the baby today. So she woke up like before I was in labor, before I had told her I was in labor, and she had showered and was literally standing at her door with her purse on her shoulder. And John texted and was like, hey, Jenna's in labor. And she's like, I'm on my way.
Like at 6 a.m. Yeah.
She knew. Mm-hmm. We had not talked to her. We had not, we didn't want to wake her up or anything, but somehow she just knew. She got to our house so fast. And we basically high-fived in the driveway. Although I didn't really high-five her because I was in very active, maybe even transition labor. And we left. And we left our house by like 6:15. Okay. So
at this point, I think I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Sarah, just try to get there.
Yeah. Sarah was like, okay, well, and I told her I was getting in the shower. She's like, okay, I'm going to make coffee and then I will meet you at your house. I'm like, okay. I got out of the shower and I was like, no time, going to the hospital. We got to go. And it was funny because when you go back and you looked at the text messages, my messages were like shorter and more direct, less punctuation, like just, and then they just didn't make sense. And then I just stopped texting altogether.
And they weren't going to let us in, right? Like, is this when I'm trying to remember, like by May, like the hospitals were completely shut down to do this?
You would have been able to go in.
They were letting us.
You had credentials for one of the hospitals, but not the other.
Okay.
So
yeah. I was like,
where I was delivering, you would have been able to go.
Okay. I couldn't remember like timelines wise.
So we leave 6:15. It takes us approximately 15 or so minutes to get there, right? It's before there's a lot of traffic. I do not know what John speed limit was. But we got to the hospital and there's no parking spots. Right. So we pull up.
Of course not.
And he lets me out at like the entrance to the hospital to go find a parking spot. And I'm standing there like bent over at the side, like, okay, I don't know what to do. And this nurse, this wonderful nurse was like, I think you need a wheelchair, don't you? And I was like, I do.
Yeah.
So this random stranger, she wheels me in and they start my COVID screen at like the entrance to the hospital. And I'm like, I don't have COVID. Get me to where I can deliver a baby. And the nurse is like, we're gonna go to the elevator now. I like, thank you for your time or whatever. And John is still parking the car. And we get in the elevator and there's just a bunch of nurses that are all going into their shift. And I'm sitting in this wheelchair, just like making all these feral animal noises. Like I am in it. I'm by myself. Nobody knows who I am. We get up to labor and delivery. She drops me off at labor and delivery. I'm sitting in the wheelchair and the lady at the check-in is like, can you fill out this form for me? And I'm like, no, I cannot. I cannot. And John came up behind me and he's like, we need to get her into a delivery room now. Like she needs to deliver. And they're like, okay, we'll take you to triage. Like, this is a mistake, but okay. So we wheeled me to triage. The little lady's like talking away, like, we'll get your forms filled out. Your husband can do it and this and that. They want me to get out of the wheelchair, get onto a triage bed. They're like, okay, can you just change into a gown? He's like, stop making her do things. Like this baby is coming. This lady is not lying. Like this is happening. And
two questions that need to be is what number baby is this? And how quickly did you deliver your first?
Right.
Or second? Or you know what I mean? Like if I was with you, I would have been like, she has babies in 3 hours. Like, you know what I mean? Like
the problem was that John was trying to park the car because he's a very good law-abiding citizen. And he was trying to make sure that we didn't just leave our car randomly in the middle of the road. And I was heavily into transition and was not able to really fully speak for myself. I could not write my own name on the admitted form versus just like even saying something like, I'm going to have a baby. So I climb out of the wheelchair and onto the triage bed and I'm like, I want to push. And he's like, did you hear that? Did it? She wants to push. She wants to push. She wants to push. And he's like talking to the nurses and they're like, okay. And they're like, let's slide off this diaper. And they're like, John says, he's like, rip it off of her. Rip it. She's going to have a baby. And so they check me and I am 10 centimeters. I am like there. Maggie's head is there. Like it is time. So they roll the triage bed down the hallway.
With you in it?
With me in it. I'm like, the world is seeing all of Jenna's under.
Are you on your hands and knees or what?
I was on my side. Like
okay.
Gripping the side of the bed, just like making all the noises. Right. And so they wheel me down the hallway and I was put into a COVID positive room because I did not complete my COVID screen at the beginning. And I did not complete the COVID test that they were testing all the moms for, going into the hospital. So I'm in this COVID positive room. Everybody's, around or whatever. And I'm like, there better be a doctor or somebody to catch this baby. The baby is coming now. And I pushed maybe 3 times and she was there. And that was it.
And no doula made it. Just so you know.
We made it to the hospital and we were lucky. And she was born at 7:01. So when I woke up at 5 a.m. from 5 to 7, that's when she was born.
Crazy.
Unreal.
I mean, I could do a whole podcast on Sarah and I's conversations in the background of like, did she have a baby? Like no one's answering the phone, of course, at this point. Like what room are you in? Like there's no time, like baby's here, all the things.
Yeah, so, it was just, then there was a text that just said baby's here. Everybody got a text. My mom got a text and all it said was baby is here. And that was it. Because it was just like, what just happened?
What just happened? Okay. So we got to keep rolling into baby number 4. But remember we said earlier, you guys, everyone has a different hard. Can you just tell Maggie's diagnosis so that if someone else is listening, they know they could reach out to you?
Yes. So when Maggie was born, she was born so quickly. She did not have the mucus pushed from her lungs at all. And she was not breathing when she was born. So she was immediately put on oxygen and then did spend several days in the NICU transitioning. We were very fortunate that her lungs were fully developed. She was okay. But this was definitely part of my heart because this birth was traumatic. Not only did it happen quickly, but then my baby was immediately taken from me and brought to the NICU. And I was not allowed to see her until they had her stabilized. So it was whirlwind. And then all of a sudden, nothing. And I'm in a room by myself with one other nurse. And it's the middle of a pandemic and I can't go and see my baby. And then John went and saw her. So I was really by myself and I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So that was my heart. There's a whole nother podcast episode too. We could talk about that for forever, but she was okay.
Yeah. But the fact that we're talking about 2 hours and 15 minutes after Jenna opened her eyes, her baby was in the world and not with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a different kind of hard.
If it was my first baby also, I think I would have handled it differently than I did. And I'm very grateful that I had the experience of understanding, like, I know in my logical side of my brain that the best thing for her is to not be with me because she's getting medical care that she needs. But in my mom heart, oh my gosh, this is my baby. Like I need to be with this child. And I know that if I had been near her or with her, I would have impeded what they were trying to do. I would not have been able to keep my hands off of her or be away from her because she was my brand new baby. But yeah, so that was my heart. That was definitely not an easy thing for me at all.
Yeah. So a little bit while later, it was very quick after, Jenna's like, I'm pregnant again.
9 months.
9 months again. Okay. I was like, it was pretty fast. So 9 months later, you're pregnant again. Now with your first 3, right? The assigned sex was a surprise.
For everyone but me.
Okay.
I found out.
You found out, but no one else, like not even John.
John found out with Maggie.
Okay.
And we just didn't tell anybody. And then with Emily and Sophie, I knew and nobody else did.
Okay. So then you're pregnant again and you have 3 girls.
Yes.
Like are you like, I'm definitely just having 4 girls at this point? Like, is your brain like?
Yeah, we were so sure because with every child that you have, there's a certain percentage that you are likely to have that same sex again. And so we're like, at this point 4, and I'm one of 5 girls. So we were really like, oh my gosh, this is definitely going to be a girl. And then it was not. He's little. He's just such a boy.
The little boy comes with his 3 bigs, you know? Oh, I love it. Okay. So this time you call, and I mean, I think we had a realistic conversation. First of all, I think I was like, I'm already fully booked.
You were.
Which is insane. Sure. Like, you know, as soon as, I don't know why, but as soon as everyone finds out they're pregnant, I'm like, right now we're recording in January. We're booking September. So as soon as you pee on a stick and you're 4 weeks pregnant, Heidi and Colin are fully booked. So it's crazy. So by the time our clients think to call us again, because they're like, oh, I can wait, you know, it's like, oh, so I think we were already fully booked, but we also had this realistic conversation that was like, there isn't like a step approach to the way that doulas charge, right? It's like to be on call, it's like thousands of dollars.
Right.
And it was like, Jenna, I'm not sure on your 4th baby, you need thousands of dollars of support here. So I think we just kind of agreed, like, let's just see how it happens. And if I'm meant to be in your birth space, it will open up and I will be there, right? Yes. Like the universe will pave an opportunity for me to support you if I'm supposed to be there. So I had you penciled in on my calendar and, you know, kind of like invited you to all the doula things, but you were like, I have 3 kids. Like, I'm not probably going to come to any of these. And like life, you know, it goes on, right? And I was like, am I going to make it? Am I going to not make it? Is Jenna going to call me? You know, all the things. So how did you know you were in labor with number 4?
I didn't believe it for a little while, honestly. Okay. It was John that was like, no, it's time. So I, again, had tons of prodromal labor, fourth kid. At this point, I'm like, you know what? Kid's going to come when he's going to want to come. I was so much more relaxed this time. And I went 40 weeks and 2 days. So he was the longest that I was pregnant as well. And I remember very clearly when I was pregnant with Maggie, you told me, you were like, you will go into labor overnight because you are a mom. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And you're like, no, moms who have other kids don't go into labor until they know that their other children are safe. And that is exactly what happened. So I had contractions throughout the day, on the day before Jay was born. I'm like, yeah, this could be it. I don't know. This is annoying. I took my kids to dance. I'm driving carpool. I'm like, man, I should probably time these at some point. I don't know, whatever. We'll see what happens. I just ignored it. 8 o'clock comes. All my kids are asleep. And I'm like, dude, I think we need to time these. And he's like, all right, we can time them. I'm going to call my parents. We'll see what happens. And as the night progresses, we get closer at about midnight. And I'm starting to make noise as my contractions are happening. And I'm swaying. I can't settle down. I'm moving around, whatever else. And John's like, you know what? I'm going to call your mom. I'm like, no, don't wake her up. Don't wake her up. He's like, no, we need to go. Worst case scenario, we go to the hospital and they say this is just prodromal labor and we come back home. I'm like, I guess. Okay. So he calls my mom. My mom comes and because of Maggie's birth, she was like, oh my gosh. So she didn't tie her shoes. She was there as fast as she could, rushing, thinking this is going to be another repeat of Maggie. And this is at midnight. We go drive to the hospital. My contractions are still happening. I get into triage. I'm very calm. And they're like, oh yeah, you're definitely in labor. You're 5 to 6 centimeters dilated. And I'm like, oh, I didn't believe it. I did not think I was in labor until somebody confirmed and said, yes, you are in labor, because I just thought it was prodromal labor. I didn't want to believe it, but it was. It was.
It's so crazy.
It's wild.
And at this point, you're having a long labor for you.
Yeah.
Right? You had contractions all day.
Yeah.
It picked up at 8 p.m. It's 4 hours later at midnight.
Yeah.
It's building much more slow, but your water's intact, right?
Yep.
So it's building slowly.
Yep.
Okay. So what happens next?
They put me in a room. They told me I was a higher risk pregnancy because it was my fourth child. So I had to have 2 IV ports. I tried very hard not to have them. And they were like, no, if you hemorrhage, you have to have them. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to be connected to anything. And they're like, okay. So the compromise was I had the IV ports in my arms, but I didn't have to be connected to anything. And they gave me wireless monitoring, which was amazing. And then they left me to labor, and I labored all night.
Crazy, right?
Mm-hmm. All night. I stayed up all night. It was funny because I was like, I don't know that I've ever really truly pulled a dusk to dawn all nighter. And that was truly one. I did not sleep at all. John, poor guy, was falling asleep in between contractions. So every 2 minutes he'd be nodding off, and then I'd be like, I need help. And he'd wake up and help me, and then nod off again. But I was most comfortable on the exercise ball. I was most comfortable when there was pressure on my lower back and a double hip squeeze. And I was swaying, I was moving, I was bouncing. And I was progressing very slowly, very slowly. What is this? This is
how? Yeah. And were you kind of in denial? They're telling me and I'm in labor, but it doesn't really feel like I'm in labor.
I was definitely feeling like I was in labor. I was just more dude, what is taking so long? Why is this? This is so different. And of course, you being you had warned me. You're like, no, this kid's going to take a long time. This is going to be your long labor. You should be ready. And sure enough, he took his sweet time.
3 and 4 can be wild cards.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I remember sleeping all the way through the night. So at any point were you we should call Heidi?
I text you a couple of times because I know that if I call you, I would wake you up. But texting you, I could keep you updated. So when you woke up on your own, you'd know what was happening, and it wouldn't be a complete and total crazy surprise again.
Yeah.
So I had been texting you. I text you even things like, this is my room number. This is how far apart my contractions are. This is what I'm doing. Like, just, I guess in some ways texting you felt like talking to you. And so I kept texting you, and then I got responses from you of like, OMG, I'm awake. This is what's happening. Like
And I was awake early for some reason. Like I was awake like 5 or 6-ish. I can't remember.
Because you had swapped with Colin. So you were with somebody else. Someone else was laboring.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And you were coming into the hospital. And so you had like gone home to sleep because you needed sleep. And so you guys had traded off. And when you came back in, you checked in, and then you were like, oh, she's this other woman who is in labor. She's asleep and she has an epidural. Would it be okay
That's
if I come
right.
and check on you?
That's right. Yeah, because I switched at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and she was sound asleep with an epidural. And I was like, oh, she's good. I'm going to go labor with Jenna.
Yeah. So you came in at around 7.
Okay.
And I have told everyone this. I don't know that I've ever truly cried like grateful tears of joy of like just pure and complete like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see this person in my life. Like I haven't experienced that until you walked in, and I just felt like everything. Like I was shaking. I was most certainly in transition, and here comes Heidi, and it was like there was like a beam of light behind you of like, oh, here's Heidi. She's here. She's ready to take care of me. And it was just amazing. It was so good.
And you were amazing. So let's talk about what worked. I mean, you were having a longer, slow labor.
Yes.
And, I just remember like you were on the toilet and making you squat and do double hip squeezes. And like, I mean, he was taking his time to tuck his chin and rotate into the right position. And, but I just took a picture of us on the toilet because I love transition pictures because, one eye's going to the left and one eye's going down. But you were able to take a transition picture. It was kind of fun. So from the time I walked in, at what time was he born?
8:50.
8:50. Okay. Cause I know I wasn't with you for that long of a period of time.
No.
So, I got to be with you through the hard, I think, through the transition and through the pushing.
Yes.
How long did you push with number 4?
Almost an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, my water had not broken. I had the option to break my water. Like the OB on call had offered to break my water earlier in the middle of the night. And I was afraid to break my water because I didn't want to rush any part of it after Maggie's birth. I was okay with things going slower and at the pace that they were supposed to go at, because I was terrified that if I did anything to augment it, that I was going to hurt the delivery or my child. So I waited, and sure enough, I started pushing, and the midwives were like, did your water break yet? And I'm like, no, do you think we can break that now? And they're like, yeah. So they broke my water as I was pushing. And there was a ton of water. It was like, I think in some ways it held me back from being able to progress more. And I was glad that I finally did, because then things really started moving
from there. Mm-hmm. Jenna, like you pushed and pushed and pushed for an hour. And then like, what was it like to deliver a baby boy?
Well, first of all, I pushed in all kinds of different positions. Yep. And I'm so grateful that you were there, because you were like, okay, she wants to move. Okay, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing that. And the midwives there were amazing too. And I think what happened was I got really tired, and it just hurt. I mean, giving birth, it hurts, and you have to surrender and recognize that in order to be able to surrender to what's happening, you have to accept that. And you gave me the pep talk of my life, because you said, you were like, your flight or fight response has been triggered, and you need to pick, you need to choose. This is your time to be a mom. You have to birth this child. You have to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So I got on my knees, and that, for whatever reason, was what was most comfortable for me and where I felt like I was engaging him the most. So after having chosen all these different positions, on my knees was finally where it was. I was facing the head of the bed, and I will never forget, because I felt him descend. I felt him like engage and come down. He was quick to be pushed out once he was in the right position. And I caught him. I was able to reach down, and I was the first person to hold this child. And the first thing that he saw, or that, I saw, was eye contact together. I pulled him up and was able to look at him, and I saw him breathing, and I just burst into tears, because I was like, I did it. I did exactly what I wanted to do. I was safe. I was at the hospital. He was safe. He was breathing. I did it unmedicated. It was just such a full circle moment for me. And I attribute so much of that to you being able to help me get there. So for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you.
Such a God moment. Like I said, I knew that like the universe was going to put me there if I was meant to be there. And it just worked out so perfectly that I was always going to be there, that time.
So cool.
There's this photo of you that I took, like that moment that you're describing, where you're just holding him against you and you're bawling in the emotions. Like, I mean, I've never probably cried so hard at a birth ever. Just seeing like this giant wave of emotion wash over you, of kind of like a redemptive birth experience.
It was so healing. It was so healing. I think that that's such a good way to put it, and that's where I feel like I know that my family is complete, because everything that I had been afraid of, everything that I felt like maybe I had not accomplished that far, everything that I felt like had not gone well, did go well. It was my full circle, just every single part of it. I checked all of my boxes. I just felt so healed from that experience. And it all just came rushing out as soon as he was delivered, and just this wave of emotion and gratitude, and just, it was intense. It was an immense feeling for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know that we like pushed through really fast to go through 4 birth stories.
Yes.
But I hope everybody just hung in, because they're just so amazing. And before we close, just remind us again your Instagram and your blog.
Sure. Parenthood and Pushups, because those are the 2 biggest things in my lives right now. Do a lot of parenting, and I try and exercise as much as I can. So Parenthood and Pushups on Instagram or .com.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone will just take a minute to follow you. Love everything Parenthood and Pushups.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for all of it.
Thank you for being part of the Birth Story family and listening to this episode. On Tuesdays every week are doula diaries, little snippets and tidbits from my week, along with some teaching and education. And then on Thursdays, we meet here for our birth stories and our expert speakers. So thank you for being here and listening to the podcast twice a week. And if you are left wanting more, like Heidi, I've listened to all the episodes, I've read your entire book, then I hope you will meet me in Birth Story Academy and let me be your online childbirth educator to prepare you for your hospital birth, no matter what that looks like. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will